Welcome, curious minds, to the deep dive. Today we're plunging into, well, a really significant geopolitical shift, the recent U.S. military action against Iran's nuclear program.
A huge event.
Absolutely. You've sent us a stack of compelling sources, articles, expert analyses, reports, and our mission, as always, is to navigate this complex landscape. We want to extract the crucial nuggets of knowledge and help you understand what truly matters and why. Is this decisive strike a one-off event, or does it signal something, more fundamental, a lasting shift in U.S. foreign policy, maybe even global power dynamics?
Indeed. We're definitely going beyond the headlines here. We need to unpack the strategic choices, the rationale behind them, and the immediate implications of these strikes. They really are unprecedented.
Yeah.
What's fascinating, I think, is how the U.S. approach hasn't just evolved, it's pivoted fundamentally. It signals perhaps a new era for global power dynamics and how major nations might tackle these complex threats going forward.
Okay, so let's unpack this with the immediate facts first. Our sources tell us that on June 21st, 2025, the U.S. carried out Operation Midnight Hammer. This was a direct military strike, right?
Direct military strike,
Yeah.
yes, on Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities, Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan.
And the scale, the nature of it immediately stands out. What specifically made this operation so, remarkable? Why is everyone calling it unprecedented?
Well, it certainly wasn't a minor operation, not symbolic at all. The U.S. used these powerful GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrators, the bunker busters,
Yeah, right.
delivered with pinpoint accuracy by B-2 stealth bombers. And these aren't just any bombs. They're specifically designed to destroy targets buried deep underground, heavily fortified ones.
Like Fordow.
Exactly like Fordow. One of the main targets, which sources confirmed, was previously thought to be unreachable, even by Israel, because it's so deep inside a mountain.
Wow.
And it wasn't just aerial strikes. They also used Tomahawk missiles, launched from submarines, which hit the other two sites, Natanz and Isfahan. So a comprehensive approach.
Multi-pronged, high precision, hitting the very heart of their enrichment infrastructure.
That's it.
And the results? Pretty immediate and declarative, weren't they? President Trump said the sites were completely and totally obliterated.
He did. He hailed it as a spectacular military success.
And that level of direct intervention against, sovereign nuclear infrastructure, designed for destruction, not just limitation, that's the unprecedented part our sources keep highlighting.
It really is. This wasn't about setting the program back a few months or years. The stated aim was elimination.
So connecting this to the bigger picture then.
Yeah.
It's a profound departure from what the U.S. has done before.
Absolutely. Previous policies often focused on containment, sanctions, maybe diplomatic efforts, trying to manage Iran's nuclear ambition.
Right, the JCPOA being the prime example.
Exactly. This action, though, seems driven by a different philosophy. Decisive engagement.
Yeah.
Outright destruction of capability, not just limiting it or negotiating around it. It's a bold statement, a real shift in strategic thinking, prioritizing, neutralizing the threat quickly over maybe longer diplomatic routes.
Okay, so given the magnitude, why now? Why this decisive move at this particular moment? Our sources mention something called the stack model. What's that about?
Yeah, the stack model. It suggests a unique convergence, sort of perfect storm of optimal circumstances that made this operation not just possible, but maybe strategically advantageous.
So what were these favorable conditions that suddenly aligned?
Well, it raises that key question for strategic planners, doesn't it? How do you spot the right moment for something this big? The stack model isn't just luck. It's apparently an analytical framework, pinpointing when critical geopolitical factors line up just right.
Okay.
In this case, sources detail several key things stacking up. First, the perceived neutralization of Hezbollah.
Iran's key proxy.
Right. After Israel's operations, pagers, and days of repentance, their rocket capabilities and air defenses were apparently significantly weakened. That removed a big regional obstacle.
Okay, one piece.
Second, the return of Donald Trump to the presidency, known for a more direct foreign policy approach, skepticism towards multilateral deals.
Makes sense.
Third, Iran seemed increasingly isolated geopolitically, facing international pressure, fewer strong regional allies.
Right.
And finally, Israel's own internal preparedness and strategic readiness. So one source actually described this whole combination as the best historical conditions for a strike, the optimal timing to act.
Optimal timing. And the objective was just crystal clear.
Absolutely. To neutralize Tehran's nuclear capabilities and destroy Iran's nuclear program. End of story. closing the path to nuclear weapons.
President Trump saying the program no longer exists, no ambiguity there.
Not at all. Not about halting enrichment temporarily, but eradication.
And this reflects that core belief we hear about peace through strength.
It does, very strongly. You saw Israeli President Isaac Herzog praising Trump's bold decision, calling it historic. He said, history will record that President Trump acted to deny the world's most dangerous regime the world's most dangerous weapons.
Strong words.
Very. And the justification, the immediate one, was based on U.S. and Israeli intelligence. They concluded Iran was stockpiling uranium enriched to over 60%.
Which is, not quite weapons grade at 90%, but way beyond civilian use.
Exactly. Suitable only for weapons. It's a critical threshold. And experts estimated Iran's dash time, the time needed to enrich that further into a deliverable weapon, had shrunk to just 2 to 5 days.
2 to 5 days, that's incredibly short.
Chillingly short. It drastically reduces the window for diplomacy or even covert action. It shifts the calculation towards direct intervention, you could argue.
And it's fascinating that this came after diplomacy had apparently failed. Sources say Trump ordered the strikes only when back-channel talks stalled.
That's right. And after Iran reportedly blew past a 60-day deadline to stop enrichment, he even publicly dismissed his own intelligence community's assessment that Iran wasn't actively building a weapon, saying they were wrong.
Suggests a very strong personal conviction about the threat level.
It certainly seems that way. And there's another layer here. Sources mention a masterful deception campaign.
A deception campaign, aided by the U.S.
Reportedly, yes. Designed to lull Iran into thinking an attack wasn't imminent. Maybe suggesting a U.S.-Israel rift over the nuclear talks, things like that.
So strategic misdirection.
Highly sophisticated misdirection, apparently. Involving maybe curated leaks, diplomatic posturing. Crucial for achieving surprise and ensuring the operation's success. Notably, sources mention no Israeli planes were lost during the air operations that preceded the main strike.
Speaks to meticulous planning and coordination.
A very calculated approach. Minimize risk, maximize impact.
So this deep dive really does show a clear pivot from past U.S. policy on Iran. It feels like more than just one incident. It's maybe an example of a bigger strategic rethink.
I think that's fair to say. Let's compare it quickly.
Yeah, let's.
Think back to the Obama administration. The JCPOA, the Iran nuclear deal, in 2015. That was all about limiting the program through diplomacy, inspections, sanctions relief.
International supervision, managing the threat.
Exactly. Containment and management through international frameworks, trusting that monitoring and economic incentives would work.
Then Trump's first term, pulled out of the JCPOA in 2018, called it defective.
Said it didn't address missiles or regional activities,
Right.
Reinstated maximum pressure sanctions, trying to force Iran back to the table by crippling the economy.
And the Biden administration tried to revive the deal.
They did, but sources say those efforts were thwarted, particularly after the October 7th attacks. That diplomatic window essentially slammed shut again.
So these recent strikes really underscore that shift towards a direct military solution.
It seems so. A calculated decision, the sources suggest, made possible by geopolitical foresight, maybe U.S. energy abundance, giving it more leverage, and a posture of control, not just provocation.
And they were careful to say it wasn't about regime change.
A crucial distinction. The messaging was clear. This was not about regime change, but specifically neutralizing the nuclear threat. Targeted, disciplined use of force for a specific goal without getting bogged down in trying to reshape Iran internally.
Surgical precision. Addressing a perceived clear danger.
That's the framing.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, and maybe broader. This strategic shift seems to extend beyond just Iran or military action. AI policy.
Yes. It's fascinating, isn't it? Sources indicate the Trump administration has fundamentally rewritten the United States' international AI strategy. That suggests a much wider reevaluation of how America projects power globally.
How does AI tie into this more assertive foreign policy? It feels like a leap.
Well, the administration moved to what's described as a laissez-faire regulatory regime, sometimes called accelerationist. They did this by scrapping something called the AI diffusion rule.
Okay, what was the AI diffusion rule?
Think of it as a sort of non-proliferation principle rooted in the Cold War. The idea was to restrict exports of advanced tech that could give adversaries an edge.
Right, keep advanced tech out of rivals' hands.
Exactly. But by scrapping that rule and adopting this accelerationist stance, the U.S. is now actively encouraging massive exports of advanced U.S.-designed AI chips. Laissez-faire means fewer government controls on those exports.
So instead of restricting tech, they're flooding the market with American tech.
That seems to be the strategy, to rapidly expand the U.S. AI ecosystem, maintain global market share, and potentially box out Chinese technology.
A complete reversal.
It's a fundamental pivot from non-proliferation to strategic technology diffusion. The idea seems to be leveraging countries with lots of capital and energy, think Gulf powers like the UAE, Saudi Arabia, to build massive AI infrastructure, but using American technology.
Embedding U.S. tech dominance globally?
Precisely. It's not just selling chips. It's about creating a global infrastructure dependent on American innovation. A counterforce to rivals like China, accelerating the deployment of U.S.-led AI in key strategic regions. It's quite a sophisticated play, mixing economics and technology leadership.
Okay, wow. So with such a huge event, the strikes, and this broader strategic shift, how are people reacting? What are the consequences playing out?
Well, the immediate reactions from U.S. and Israeli officials were, as you'd expect, strong praise. President Trump thanking Prime Minister Netanyahu, saying they worked as a team like perhaps no team has ever worked before.
Highlighting that close coordination.
Absolutely. Secretary of State Marco Rubio issued a pretty stern warning to Iran. Retaliation would be the worst mistake they've ever made. He affirmed the U.S. hit its objective, but held other targets if needed.
And Defense Secretary Herzog.
He reiterated it was a precision operation, just focused on the nuclear threat.
Interesting to see how think tanks like the Atlantic Council weighed in. Matthew Kronig declared the U.S. ended one of its most serious foreign policy threats.
He did. And he expected the crisis to quickly de-escalate, comparing it to the Soleimani killing aftermath. Even added provocatively, if Iran rebuilds, we can hit them again.
Wow. And others there agreed.
Yeah, experts like William Wexler and R. Clark Cooper also seem to think Trump made the right call and that Iran's options for retaliation were limited, suggesting it was calculated risk that, in their view, paid off.
But Iran did retaliate, didn't they?
They did. Iran's foreign minister, Abbas Araki, vowed no return to diplomacy until it had retaliated. Stated pretty clearly the U.S. only understands the language of threat and force.
And they fired missiles.
A volley of missiles at Israel, yes. Caused significant damage and injuries in Tel Aviv, according to reports. A direct escalation.
And the Strait of Hormuz threat?
The Iranian parliament also approved considering closing the Strait of Hormuz. That's huge. About 30% of the world's seaborne oil goes through there. Even threatening closure sends jitters through global energy markets.
So despite the initial operational success, these geopolitical and economic risks are still very much alive. Retaliation against U.S. interests, shipping disruptions, energy market impacts.
Undeniably real risks. Though interestingly, Landon Durrance noted the strikes themselves happened without immediately unsettling markets or supply.
Why was that?
He attributed it to strong market stability beforehand, and crucially, the fact the U.S. targeted the weapons program, not Iran's conventional oil and gas infrastructure. That targeted approach, he argues, signaled strength, but also restraint, reassuring markets perhaps.
A delicate balance. What about other big players? Russia, China, how do they see this?
Well, Alan Pino suggests Trump sent a powerful signal to Russia and China about U.S. willingness to use force for core interests. A reassertion of resolve, maybe?
But would China back Iran?
Tuvia Goering indicates China is actually unlikely to do much to aid Iran's sinking ship, especially if Iran threatens Hormuz or gets closer to a bomb. China has huge economic stakes in global shipping and worries about nuclear proliferation itself.
Right. Their own interests come first.
Exactly. And John Herbst even floated the idea that these strikes might put Trump in a stronger position regarding Russia's war in Ukraine, implying demonstrated resolve in one area could deter aggression elsewhere.
Fascinating ripple effects, or potential ones at least. So, wrapping this deep dive up, what does this all mean for you, the listener?
We've definitely seen a bold strategic shift, executed with precision, aimed at taking out a long-standing nuclear threat.
But one that clearly carries significant regional, even global implications, and it points to this fundamentally redefined American grand strategy.
Indeed. This decisive military action, combined with that pivot in AI policy from non-proliferation to tech diffusion, it really does signal a new era, one prioritizing strength, actively shaping outcomes, leveraging tech advantage in new ways.
It feels like a moment of profound change, setting new precedents for how global powers might deal with complex threats, how they define their influence.
Absolutely. So here's a provocative thought to leave you with. In this apparent new strategic era, this peace through strength posture, where the U.S. seems intent on shaping outcomes, What might be the next global challenge where we see this kind of decisive, maybe technologically infused approach applied, perhaps in an unexpected way?
Something to definitely think about. How might this new posture ripple into other complex geopolitical situations?
Exactly. What other dominoes might fall or be pushed?